तिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवम् साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादं सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नामिने गौरक्षे नमः। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिकान्ता राधाकान्त नमोस्तुते तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Welcome everyone to Bhagavad-gita or Bhakti-sastri class. We'll chant the Mangalacharana prayers for Bhagavad-gita. Namostute व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायत पत्रनेत्रे येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वलितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपरिजाताय पुत्रवैत्रैकपाणिः ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। We'll start a new section today, Unit 3, chapters 13 to 18. These chapters are more dedicated to Jnana section of Bhagavad-gita. Therefore, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur calls this section as Jnana Yoga. However, we will find the subject matter of Karma Yoga also, Bhakti Yoga also, everything. More prominently, there will be discussion of Jnana. And Krishna is going to explain everything, keeping his material nature in the center. In the middle 6 chapters, it was all about Krishna. Krishna, his energies, his opulences, his relationship with the material world, with the living entities, his universal form, his devotees, the qualities of his devotees that make them dear to him. But these 6 chapters, or we can say these 5 chapters, 12 to 17, they talk more about his material nature, Prakriti, and the 3 modes, three gunas. So that is the subject matter. Fine. So let's look at chapter 13. Nature, the enjoyer, and consciousness. Let's have a quick look back what we have discussed so far in chapter 12. First 6 chapters of Gita primarily talk about very simple question.
Self.
Karma yoga. Middle six chapters of Gita talk about
Bhakti Yoga.
does Gita promote bhakti lead to karma or karma lead to bhakti?
Jnana.
Karma lead to bhakti.
So in the middle six chapters, Krishna described bhakti yoga along with the precise natures of the jiva, Lord, the matter, and how are they related. The first six chapters, 1 to 6, showed how karma leads to bhakti. The last six chapters will show how jnana leads to bhakti. First section, the field, Kshetra, and its knower, Kshetragya. Fine. So the first verse of this chapter is a question by Arjuna. Arjuna Uvacha Prakritim Purusham Chaiva Kshetram Kshetragyam Evacha Etad Veditum Ichami Jnanam Geyam Chakeshava. Six questions. Six terms are mentioned. So six questions. He's asking their definition. Arjuna said, "Oh my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the object of knowledge." The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, okay, there are two verses, no? Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Idam Shariram Kaunteya Kshetramidhi Abhidiyate Etad Yo Vetti Tam Aprahu Kshetragya Iti Tad Vidaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, this body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, Kshetra. And one who knows this body is called the knower of the field, Kshetragya. So six questions are there, six terms are mentioned. Prakriti, Purusha, Kshetram, Kshetragya, Jnana, Jnana. Krishna is going to answer in a different order than what Arjuna asked. He will first address the topic of Kshetra and Kshetragya. Then he'll address the topic of Jnana, Geya. Then he'll address the topic of Prakriti and Purusha. So first he's talking about Kshetra. So he's saying this body is called Kshetra, the field. And the one who knows the body is called the knower of the field, Kshetragya. Fine. Perfect. Arjuna was inquisitive about Prakriti, Purusha. Prakriti means nature, Purusha means enjoyer. Kshetra, the field, Kshetragya, its knower, and knowledge and the object of knowledge. When he inquired about all these, Krishna said that this body is called the field, and that one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. This body is the field of, why is this body called the field? Because this body is the field of activity for the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul is entrapped in material existence, and he attempts to lord it over material nature. And so, according to his capacity to dominate material nature, he gets a field of activity. As per his capacity to dominate material nature, he gets a field of activity. That field of activity is the body. So, why someone has gotten a particular kind of body? That is on the basis of that living entity's desire and capacity to dominate over material nature. Therefore, the body is called Kshetra, or the field of activity for the condition. So, now the person who should not identify himself with the body is called Kshetragya, the knower of the field. It's not very difficult to understand the difference between the field and its knower, the body and the knower of the body. Any person can consider that from childhood to old age, he undergoes so many activities and the actual field of activities. Sorry, he undergoes so many changes of body and yet is still one person remaining. Thus, there is a difference between the knower of the field of activities and the actual field of activities. A living conditioned soul can thus understand that he is different from the body. It is described in the beginning, Dehosmin, that the living entity is within the body and that the body is changing from childhood to boyhood and from boyhood to youth, and from youth to old age. And the person who owns the body knows that the body is changing. The owner is distinctly Kshetragya. Sometimes he thinks, I'm happy, I am a man, I am a woman, I am a dog, I am a cat. These are the bodily designations of the knower. But the knower is different from the body. Although we may use many articles, our clothes, etc., we know that we are different from the things used. Similarly, we also understand by a little contemplation that we are different from the body. I or you or anyone else who owns the body is called Kshetragya, the knower of the field of activities, and the body is called Kshetra, the field of activities itself. In the first six chapters of Bhagavad-gita, the knower of the body, the living entity, and the position by which he can understand the Supreme Lord are described. In the middle six chapters of the Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the relationship between the individual soul and the super soul in regard to devotional service are described. The superior position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the subordinate position of the individual soul are definitely defined in these chapters. The living entities are subordinate under all circumstances, but in their forgetfulness, they are suffering. When enlightened by pious activities, they approach the Supreme Lord in different capacities, as the distressed, those in want of money, the inquisitive, and those in search of knowledge. That is also described. Now, starting with the 13th chapter, how the living entity comes into contact with material nature and how is delivered by the Supreme Lord through the different methods of fruitive activities, cultivation of knowledge, and the discharge of devotional service are explained. Although the living entity is completely different from the material body, he somehow becomes related. This also is explained. Okay. So very nicely, the philosophical aspect is being covered here. Very nicely, isn't it? Mhm. So the 13th chapter is talking about what? The subject matter of the jiva coming in contact with the material nature. Mm. Which means the entanglement of jiva. And then there'll be explanation on how the jiva can become liberated, right? So these are tattvas or mool siddhanta. I don't know how many of you have registered for Dashamula Tattva course. So there, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about these basic principles only, the main tenets of our Siddhanta, that what is Jiva, what is Krishna, who is Krishna, what is their position, what is material nature, how they came in contact with each other, you know. So he explains that as sutra. And that's not, as explained before by me, it's not his invention. It is something which is taken from the Shastra, scriptures, Mool Siddhanta, borrowed from Madhvacharya, right?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hmm.
One doubt, Prabhu. Prabhu,
Yep.
field and field of activity. Field means body and field of activity means the
Body.
activity performed by body. Is it
Oh,
so,
no,
Prabhu?
no. Field of activities means the place where you perform the activities. That's the field only, right? That's the body.
Okay, the place where the activity performed, the body.
It's the body.
Okay. Okay.
That's the field for the soul. The soul is performing its activities on the body.
Field and field of activity are same. Correct, Prabhu?
Right? So Prakriti here is material nature. Purusha is enjoyer. Kshetra is field. Kshetra knower of the field. Jnana is knowledge. And Gya is object of knowledge. Now these are the verses in which Krishna answers these topics or explains these topics. So Krishna made it very clear. What is the field? The body is the field. Why is this field given to me? Because I had a set of desires to fulfill. That's why this field is given to me. Right? Kshetragyam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra kshetragayor Jnanam yattaj jnanam tam mama. O son of Bharata, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies. So Krishna already mentioned Kshetragya means the soul. But then he says there is another Kshetragya who is me. And the difference between me as Kshetragya and that soul as Kshetragya is Sarva Kshetreshu Bharata. I know all the bodies. Right? I know all the bodies. Which means Paramatma is conscious of everything that's happening in everyone's body or everyone's mind. And to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge or jnana. That is my opinion. Kshetra kshetragyo jnanam yatra jnanam mat mama. To understand three things that means knowledge is to understand three things. What is that? The body, the soul, and the super soul. In other words, to understand matter, body means matter, soul means the living entity, and super soul means the Supreme Lord. So that's knowledge. That is my opinion. Very beautiful explanation by Shri Prabhupada in Purport. Nagarajan.
Hare Krishna, Prabhupada. While discussing the subject of the body and the knower of the body, the soul and the super soul, we shall find three different topics of study: the Lord, the living entity, and matter. In every field of activities, in every body, there are two souls, the individual soul and the super soul. Because the super soul is the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Krishna says, I am also the knower, but I am not the individual knower of the body. I am the supreme knower, super knower. I am present in every body as the Paramatma or super soul. One who studies the subject matter of field of activity and the knower of the field very minutely in terms of this, Bhagavad-gita can attain to knowledge. The Lord says, I am the knower of the field of activities in every individual body. The individual may be the knower of his own body, but he is not in knowledge of others' bodies. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present as the Super Soul in all bodies, knows everything about all bodies. He knows all the different bodies of all the various species of life. A citizen may know everything about his patch of land, but the king knows not only his palace, but all the properties possessed by the individual citizens. Similarly, one may be the proprietor of the body individually, but the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of all bodies. The king is the original proprietor of the kingdom, and the citizen is the secondary proprietor. Similarly, Supreme Lord is the supreme proprietor of all bodies. The body consists of the senses. The Supreme Lord is Rishikesha, which means the controller of the senses. He is the original controller of the senses, just as the king is the original controller of all the activities of the state. The citizens are secondary controller. The Lord says, I am also the knower. This means that he is the super knower. The individual soul knows only his particular body. In the Vedic literature, it is stated as follows. Kshetranihi sharirani bijam chapi subhasubhe tani veti sa yogatma tada kshetrajna uchyate. This body is called the Kshetra, and within it dwells the owner of the body and the Supreme Lord, who knows both the body and the owner of the body. Therefore, he is called the knower of all fields. The distinction between the fields of activities, the knower of activities, and the supreme knower of activities is described as follows. Perfect knowledge of the constitution of the body, the constitution of the individual soul, and the constitution of the super soul is known in terms of Vedic literature as jnana. That is the opinion of Krishna. To understand both the soul and the super soul as one, yet distinct is knowledge. One who does not understand the field of activity and the knower of activity is not in perfect knowledge. One has to understand the position of Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer of nature, and Ishvara, the knower who dominates or controls nature and the individual soul. One should not confuse the three in their different capacities. One should not confuse the painter, the painting, and the easel. This material world, which is the field of activities, is nature, and the enjoyer of the nature is the living entity, and above them both is supreme controller, the personality of Godhead. It is stated in the Vedic language in Sveteshwadara Upanishad 1.12, Bhokta Bhogyam Prerita Preritaram cha Matva Sarvam Proktam Trividham Brahmam Etat. There are three Brahman conceptions. Prakriti is Brahman as the field of activities, and Jiva, individual soul, is also Brahman and is trying to control material nature. And the controller of both of them is also Brahman, but he is the factual controller. In this chapter, it will also be explained that out of the two knowers, one is fallible and the other is infallible. One is superior and the other is subordinate. One who understands the two knowers of the field to be one and the same contradicts the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who states here very clearly, I am also the knower of the field of activity. One who misunderstands a rope to be a serpent is not in knowledge. There are different kinds of bodies and there are different owners of the bodies because each individual soul has its individual capacity for lording it over material nature. There are different bodies, but the Supreme also is present in them as a controller. The word Cha is significant, for it indicates the total number of bodies. That is the opinion of Srila Baladeva Vidyabhushana. Krishna is the super soul present in each and every body apart from the individual soul. And Krishna explicitly says here that real knowledge is to know that the super soul is the controller of both the field of activities and the finite enjoyer. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Pretty long purport. Srila Prabhupada. Anything you did not understand from this purport?
All this time, Purusha was the Supreme Lord, Krishna now, but here Purusha is defined as the living entity, the enjoyer of nature.
Purusha is defined as both the living entity and the Supreme Lord. Originally, the Supreme Lord is Purusha, but the living entity, being an Ansha of the Supreme Lord, also has a tendency to become a Purusha. So he is acting as a Purusha in conditioned state. Otherwise, the living entity is the Prakriti. In conditioned state, okay, living entity is acting as Purusha. So that's why it will be clear later. Krishna is going to explain more in verses 13.20, 21, 22. Okay, this
Can
verses.
can you just explain the analogy of the painter painting and the easel?
Okay,
Uh,
fine. So the painter, the painting, and the easel. Prabhupada gives that analogy here. One should not confuse the three in their different capacities. He's talking about Prakriti, Purusha, and the Ishvara. who dominates or controls nature and the individual soul. So one should not confuse the painter, the painting, and the easel. So here, in the explanation given by Iskcon Purishan Prabhu in the book Surrender Unto Me, he explains in this way, though I did not find any logic in that. I mean, it's not very clear logic, right? So he explained in this way. The easel is supporting the painting, right? Uh, and the painting is made by the painter. Hmm. So he's saying the easel is the prakriti, you know, which is supporting the activity, fine. And then he's explaining that the painter is the Supreme Lord. And the painting is the jiva, but I did not find that explanation logical. In my understanding, the easel is the Supreme Lord, the jiva is the painter, and the painting is Prakriti. Why? Because the easel is supporting both the painting and the painter. And the painter is, out of his, free will, is using whatever colors he or she wants to use and creating a painting. So the painting has become the field of activities. So that's material nature, isn't it? The painting is the field of activity. So that's the material nature. The painter is the jiva, and the easel is the Supreme Lord. Supporting both the painting and the painter.
Thank you, bro.
That is my understanding. Okay, but then again, that understanding can become, again, there can be some point raised there. The easel is a non-conscious entity. So how can the easel be compared to the Supreme Lord? Because whenever there is an analogy made, in analogy there has to be some similarity, right? Isn't it? So when we talk about comparing the Purusha and the Ishvara, in the analogy also there should be two conscious entities, but neither the painting is conscious nor the easel is conscious. It's only the painter who is conscious. And interestingly, Prabhupada did not borrow this analogy from either Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur or Baldev Vidyabhushan. So from where he brought this analogy, no one knows. And generally, he takes the analogy from previous acharya and then, oh, okay, this is the analogy. But he did not borrow this analogy from any one of them. It's his own analogy. On what basis he made this analogy? No explanation. Okay. So here you can fill in the places, the blank places. Like the first is the land is compared to the body. So what is happiness and distress compared to in this analogy of field and activities in the field and the farmer and the king.
And weeds,
Happiness in distress eyes.
crops and weeds,
Crops, right? Weeds. Seeds,
karma,
karma. Soul, farmer, right? King, Paramatma, super soul.
super soul.
Prabhupada uses this analogy that just like if there is a country or a province and there is a king ruling over that place, so the king has proprietorship over every single plot of land in that country or kingdom. And then the king gives up some patches of land to certain farmers. You use this for farming or agricultural purpose. So similarly, the Supreme Lord owns every single body, and the Supreme Lord has given a particular patch of field of activity, a body to a jiva. This is your quota. You cultivate crops in this land. So the king knows all the patches of land, just like that the Paramatma knows about all the bodies. But the living entity knows about his or her patch only, her body. Very beautiful analogy. This is by Bhagavad-gita.
Prabhuji, the king will also know about the seeds and crops also, like the Paramatma will be knowing that as well.
Of course. Why not? The king knows everything, no? What is the produced by a particular farmer, which crop he or she is cultivating. King knows. King can even ask for a report. So Paramatma knows.
Yes, sir.
In fact, the king may have given the land to a farmer, saying, you should only cultivate sugarcane on this land. But the farmer may start cultivating wheat or rice. So likewise, when the Paramatma has given us a body, the Paramatma has given us a purpose also of cultivating what in the body. And that we know what is that purpose. Adhato Brahma Jigyasa.
Right.
So something very interesting, which is this lesson. Each body is a tailor make for a set of material desires.
Okay, this is consisting of gross body as well as subtle body, both.
Yeah, both. Both.
The tiger had a desire to eat flesh in the previous birth.
Yes. So each body is a tailor make for a set of material desires. So the topic continues. Um, further explanation about the kshetra, the field. Tat kshetram yacha yadrikcha yadvikari yatascha yat sachayo yat prabhavascha tat samasena me shrunu. Now please hear my brief description of this field of activity and how it is constituted, what its changes are, whence it is produced, who that knower of the field of activities is, and what his influences are. So 6 further explanations are given. Yacha, Yadrik, Yad Vikari, Yata, Yad, Yad Prabhavash. What are those things? It's given more in detail in the commentary of previous acharyas. Yatcha means composition of the body. Yadrik means the quality of the body. Yad Vikari means the changes that the body undergoes. Yata means the origin of the body. Yat, identity of the knower of the body. Yat Prabhava, powers of the knower of the body. And in the column on the rightmost end, you can see the verses where these things are explained. So did you notice something very different about this chapter from other chapters? What? This chapter is more analytical in nature, no? More technical and more analytical in nature. That's why this is Jnana. Jnana Yoga. Right? That's why it's Jnana. Like Upanishads. So how many of you like this chapter? If you find it interesting? So you are a Jnani. Haven't you have that bent of mind, that inclination? Nothing wrong in that. But we can understand our inclination. If you like first 6 chapters of Gita more, that means you have karma pravritti. If you like last 6 chapters of Gita more, then you have jnana pravritti. If you like middle 6 chapters of Gita more, you have bhakti pravritti.
Bhakti portion was the best.
Oh, so now you want to switch, huh? Very good. So,
You did not ask that you like this chapter the most. We like this chapter.
that's okay. I'm not pulling anyone's leg. You know, I'm just telling that this is how we can understand our nature and inclination. Nothing wrong if you like this chapter. This is also part of Bhagavad-gita, but that shows, how we are and what nourishes us in our Krishna consciousness, what kind of subject matter, what things interest us more. So this is more technical. That's how Upanishads are. That's how the Jnana section of the scripture is. Okay. Next. Okay, we did not read the purport. Let's read this. Hello, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu Danvat. The Lord is described the field of activities and the knower of the field of activities in their constitutional position. One has to know how this body is constituted, the materials of which this body is made, under whose control the body is working, how the changes are taking place, where from the changes are coming, and what the causes are, what the reasons are, what the ultimate goal of the individual soul is, and what the actual form of the individual soul is. One should also know the distinction between the individual living soul and the super soul, their different influences, their potentials, etc. One just has to understand this Bhagavad-gita directly from the description given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all this will be clarified. But one should be careful not to consider the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every body to be one with the individual soul, the jiva. This is something like equating the and the important. Hare Krishna, Prabhupada.
Yes. ऋषिभिर्बहुधा गीतं छन्दोभिर्विविधैः पृथक् ब्रह्मसूत्रपदैश्चैव हेतुमद्भिर्विनिश्चितैः. So Krishna explained the topic of field very, minutely. Arjuna may say, I want to know more about this subject matter. Where can I find it? So Krishna is saying that knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in Vedanta Sutra with all reasonings as to cause and effect. Okay. I have a desire to study Vedanta Sutra and teach it. Let's see. It is technical, but it's going to be nice. Brahma Sutra. There is explanation by Acharyas on Brahma Sutra. Very simple ways. Vedanta Sutra. Cause and effect. So let's read the purport. Gaurang, Gunagai Gaurang.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is the highest authority in explaining this knowledge. So still, as a matter of course, learned scholars and standard authorities always give evidences from previous authorities. Krishna is explaining this most controversial point regarding the duality and non-duality of the soul and the supersoul by referring to scriptures, the Vedanta, which is accepted as authority. First, he says, this is according to different sages. As far as the sages are concerned, besides himself, Vyāsadeva, the author of the Vedanta Sutra, is a great sage. And in the Vedanta Sutra, duality is perfectly explained. And Vyāsadeva's father, Parashara, is also a great sage. And he writes in his books of religiosity, Aham Tvam Cha Tathayam Me. We, you, I, and the various other living entities are all transcendental, although in material bodies. Now we are fallen into the ways of the three modes of material nature according to our different karma. As such, some are on higher levels and some are in lower nature. The higher and lower natures exist due to ignorance and are being manifested in an infinite number of living entities. But the supersoul, which is infallible, is uncontaminated by the three qualities of nature and is transcendental. Similarly, in the original Vedas, a distinction between the soul and the supersoul and the body is made, especially in the Kathopanishad. There are many great sages who explain this, and Parashara is considered principal among them. The word Chando refer to the various Vedic literature. The Taittiriya Upanishad, for example, which is a branch of the Yajurveda, describes nature, the living entities, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated before, Kshetra is the field of activity, and there are two kinds of Kshetragya, the individual living entity and the supreme living entity. As stated in the Taittiriya Upanishad 2.5, Brahma Pucham Patistha. There is a manifestation of the Supreme Lord's energy known as Annamaya, depends upon food for existence. This is a materialistic realization of the Supreme. Then in Pranamaya, after realizing the Supreme absolute in food, one can realize the absolute truth in the living symptoms of or life forms. In the Jnana-maya, realization extends beyond the living symptoms to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. Then there is a Brahman realization called Vijnana-maya, in which the living entity's mind and the life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity himself. The next is supreme stage is Anandamaya. So realization of the all blissful nature. Thus there are 5 stages of Brahman realization which are called Brahma Puchyam. Out of this, the first 3, Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Jnanamaya, involve the fields of activities of the living entities. The transcendental to all these fields of activities is the Supreme Lord, who is called Anand. The Vedanta Sutra also describes the Supreme by saying Anandamaya. The Supreme Personal Godhead is nature, by nature full of joy. To enjoy his transcendental bliss, he expands into Vijnanamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, and Annamaya. In the field of activities, the living entity is considered to be the enjoyer, and the different form him is the Anandamaya. That means that if the living entity decides to enjoy in dovetailing himself with the Anandamaya, then he becomes perfect. This is the real picture of the Supreme Lord as the supreme knower of the field, the living entity as the subordinate knower and the nature of the field of activities. One has to search for this truth in Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra. It is mentioned here that the codes of Brahma Sutra are very nicely arranged according to cause and effect. Some of the sutras or aphorisms are na vyad ashurite, natma shute, and parattu chashrute. The first aphorism indicates the field of activities, the second indicates the living entity, the third indicates Lord, and the Samangunam among all the manifestations of various entities. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada talks about consciousness in this purport. Brahma, Pucham, Pratishtha. 5 types of consciousness. Right? Annamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya. Different levels of development of a jiva. So in different bodies, the consciousness develops to a certain extent only. Like in the animals, the consciousness cannot go beyond Annamaya and Pranamaya. It's not possible. Then in human birth, if one does not cultivate Krishna consciousness, one can come to the level of Jnanamaya, also known as Manomaya, thinking, feeling, and willing. But then taking interest into transcendental subject matter, one can further evolve one's consciousness to be Jnanamaya stage and finally Anandamaya stage. And how does that the living entity do? The body is the field, the mind is the field, the intelligence is the field. So on the basis of how the living entity uses this field, the living entity can evolve one's consciousness. Most of the people, even humans these days, they are stuck in Annamaya or maximum Pranamaya. Forget even Jnanamaya. Because Jnanamaya means, Prabhupada mentions in Srimad Bhagavatam, a cultured, civilized human society. Which means people having sound knowledge of art, literature, language, And even that is lost in the present day human society. So people are mostly annamaya and pranamaya. Eat, drink, security. There's no subtle aspect to their life, no art or culture. And then forget about transcendental knowledge. Isn't it? So this is something which I made based on some program I had attended. The gross body is the Annamaya Kosh. The subtle body is the Pranamaya, Manomaya, and Vijnanamaya Kosh. And the causal body is the Anandmaya Kosh. Sheath covering over the soul. So, first three, as Prabhupada said, are bodily consciousness. Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Jnanamaya. Material consciousness. And therefore, when one is trapped in this kind of consciousness, one's thinking is limited by the field. This is very important chapter in that sense, because it talks about how we are engaged. When we are in these three types of consciousness, our thinking is limited by the field, which means I can only think the way my mind will allow me to think, or the kind of body I have. So it's called psychological limitation. You can't think beyond, out of that. Fine. Because of being limited by the field. And when we develop knowledge of soul, this is where spiritual consciousness begins. Now we are situated on the platform of buddhi, transcendental knowledge. And fifth is a complete spiritual realization. Anandmay means not that I am not Krishna, like Krishna, full of joy. Because of my connection to the super soul, I am experiencing Ananda. As a devotee, Anandamaya stage means I am a servant of Krishna. So I'm happy. That realization.
Which it is called Vijnanamay Kosha, Anandamay Kosha. Then what does this word Kosha mean?
Kosha means sheath or covering. Now, how do we understand it? See, when we are meditating, let's talk about Ashtanga Yoga process. So the process of meditation in Ashtanga Yoga is you want to know who you are. So you are psychologically going deeper into your different aspects of existence. Fine. So first of all, you try to see your most external level of existence, and that is this material body. So then you ask yourself, am I this body? I can't be. So you go to the next thing, the next level. What is that? Am I my thoughts? No, I can't be my thoughts. That's not my identity. Then you go to the next level. Am I my discriminating ability or power? I'm not that. So in this way, these koshas, they act as sheets. When you're meditating, you will come across this, you can say barriers in your meditation. Kosha, sheath, they will act as a sheath, covering the real you. So when you cross all these sheets, then your real identity is found. That's why I'll tell you something very interesting. Nowadays in the Western world, it has come to India also. It has become a fashion to use phrases like self-love, self-compassion, self-kindness, self-respect. isn't it? So they talk about the self. You ask them what is meant by self. They all know that there is a self. But if you ask them what is that self, someone will say, this body is that self. Why? Because that person's meditation has come to that level only, or that person's introspection has come to that level only. That person is stuck at that sheath. I am this body. Some person might be able to go beyond that sheath or kosha. No, I am not this body. I am this mind, my nature, my likes, my dislikes, my opinion, my principles. So these act as sheets. And in Ashtanga, you are supposed to cross all these sheets or layers of coverings to come to your real identity. Who am I?
These are material coverings as well as spiritual coverings also, like Anandamaya Kosha, ultimately it is a spiritual covering. Can we differentiate between them?
So Anandmaya Kosha is not different from the real nature of you. It is said like a kosha. It's not. It's just like, you have an aura around you. So that you can say that's like an aura of the soul, Anandmaya Kosha.
But all the coverings are in the same category, no differentiation between material or spiritual.
How not no differentiation?
That is what I thought. There is
How no differentiation? Uh, Here is your first of all, please remove this understanding from your mind that we are talking about some physical barrier. It's all subtle, right? It is all subtle. It's not physical. It is subtle and it is material. Till the point you reach the understanding, I am a servant of Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Can you
Hmm.
explain about casual body, Prabhu? Shuttle body and the gross body, I know the
Not
structure
casual,
of
just causal.
causal. Oh, can you explain about that? I joined little late.
Causal means that is the cause, right? So it refers to the ego.
Mm.
Just like, we talk about Karana Sagara. Prabhupada translates that as causal ocean because it's the cause of the entire material creation. So causal body means the ego.
Mhm. Any structure for that, like a settled body has the mind, intelligence, and like that? Any structure for that?
Nothing, it's ego. No structure.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
Even when we talk about subtle body, there's no body, no. It's only a way of telling subtle body. There's no body. It's an aspect of existence. Subtle body, mind, intelligence, person. So there's causal aspect of our existence. So Baldev Vidyabhushan, he explains this subject very nicely. That's why I was telling that if you're interested in the subject, Vedanta Sutra is a wonderful book to study. And Baldev Vidyabhushan Prabhu has given commentary on Vedanta Sutra. So, like he gives this beautiful example in analogy. If you think about it, you'll be amazed that how gross our intelligence is and how gross our thinking is. Let's say we're talking about a country and fine. So a man is living in that country and a dog is also living in that. Okay. Is the man the citizen of the country?
Yes.
Is the dog the citizen of the country? No?
Yes.
Yes. Right? Praja. Praja means citizen. Both man and dog. Can the man realize I'm the citizen of the country?
Yes.
Yes.
Can the dog realize?
No.
No.
So, but the truth is, both are the citizens of the country. Right? However, one has a capacity to realize, the other doesn't. Right? Which means what? Truth is objective, but realization is subjective. So, I am spirit soul. I am an eternal servant of Krishna. I am Sachidananda. Anandmaya Kosh is there. Jnanmaya Kosh is there. All these different types of consciousness are there. These are truths. But their realization is a subjective experience. In some particular forms of material nature, there's no capacity to realize it. Just like the dog doesn't have capacity to realize I'm the citizen of this country. You know. And in some forms, that capacity is there to realize I'm this. So in a human being, that capacity is there to realize the different levels of consciousness or explore it and come to that. That's how the subject is being explained. So we have all these levels of consciousness. It's on us whether do we want to realize it or not. But in truth, yes, I'm a spirit. I'm full of ananda. Why are we not realizing? Because we are stuck. Our consciousness is stuck. At some level, we are blocked. Right? So Annamaya Kosha. So what is Annamaya Kosha? One who is in this stage of consciousness experiences a unifying oneness between everything. So one who is having Annamaya Kosha is also Sama. Because for that person, everything is food. And in this consciousness, you don't make any distinction between what is alive and what is not. Therefore, you can very easily say people who are non-vegetarians, they have a low level of consciousness. They're Annamaya. Everything is food. Fine. Now, this consciousness is a manifestation of Krishna's energy, Brahman, Brahmapucham, Pratishtham. Brahman is manifested in this way, in this form. Then Pranamaya. As one advances to this consciousness, one is aware of one's own active life symptoms and he identifies with them. Right. So then one who comes to pranamaya starts developing a fear for survival, maintaining one's own survival. Pranamaya push. The whole materialistic human society is on this level. Survival for the fittest. Then is Jnanamaya. Here one is engrossed in one's own thoughts, thinking, feeling, willing, one's perception of reality. Right? Ramanujacharya explains that on the basis of Taittiriya Upanishad, Jnanamaya refers to only those people who are civilized human beings. That also those who follow Vedic culture. Otherwise, ordinary human beings, they are not even Jnanamaya, Manamaya, they are just Pranamaya level. Then comes Vijnanamaya. And finally, Anandamaya.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can I ask a question, please?
Yes, Mataji.
Is this relating to all types of bodies, or is this human only, human body?
For other bodies other than human beings, they cannot go beyond the stage of Annamaya.
Okay. Second question. In the human body, is the first two stages linked to the time factor, and every human body goes through the first two stages at least?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu.
Because as we grow in age, our ability or to perceive and understand increases. Our consciousness evolves. So as a small baby, you can't be on the platform Jnanamaya or Vijnanamaya. You are mostly on Annamaya stage.
How
Okay,
about
thank you,
Prahlad
Prabhu.
Maharaj and child devotees too?
Yeah, that's a
They had,
special case. There are special cases, no?
and also the
Special,
dear body of Bharat Maharaj.
special case. That person is already disconnected from the body, material platform. Therefore, the body is not limiting the activities of the mind. Though Bharat Maharaj is in the deer body, the deer body is not limiting his activities. Why? He's disconnected from that material plane. So we should know that some people are born with an initial spiritual acumen because of their previous life. So though they are in the material body does not affect their consciousness.
And Prabhuji, one question: how does the external affect the body? Like,
How does the external affect the body means?
how are the like our outside, whatever is there outside our body, how it affects our body a lot?
In what sense, Mataji? If it's winter season, it makes you feel cold. It's summer
No,
season.
not that.
What sense?
So many other.
Like
The
what?
way we are brought up, or
So you're talking about the experiences.
yes,
The experiences you're talking.
yes,
So what is that experience? It's an intake of a particular sensual perception by the sense, leaving an impression on your mind. So it's an activity performed by you. It's an activity performed by you. Whatever your surrounding might be, if you shut down your senses, will it have any effect on you? No. That's called pratyahara in Ashtanga Yoga. Right? So our external affecting us means we are letting our senses open. So it's leaving an impression on our mind. And that changes our subtle body. Next verse. Mahabhutani ahankaro buddhiravyaktam eva cha indriyani dashekam cha pancachendriya gocharaha ichchadvesha sukham dukkham sanghataschetana tritihi etat kshetram samasena savikaram udahritam. The five great elements, false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses, and the mind. The five sense objects, desire, hatred, desire, happiness, distress, they aggregate the life symptoms and convictions. All these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. Okay. Up to here, it's field. And from here, it is interaction. Okay. Perfect. Ashoka.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. From all the authoritative statements of the great sages, the Vedic hymns, and the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra, the components of this world can be understood as follows. First, there are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are the five great elements, Mahabhuta. Then there are false ego, intelligence, and unmanifested stage of the three modes of nature. There are five senses for acquiring knowledge: the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. Then five working senses: voice, legs, hands, anus, and genitals. Then above the senses, there is mind, which is within and which can be called the same within. Therefore, including the mind, there are 11 senses altogether. Then there are the five objects of the senses: smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. Now, the aggregate of these 24 elements is called the field of activity. If one makes an analytical study of these 24 subjects, then he can very well understand the field of activity. Then there are desire, hatred, happiness, and distress, which are interactions, representations of the five great elements of the gross body. The living symptoms, represented by consciousness, the convictions, are the manifestation of the subtle body, mind, ego, and intelligence. These subtle elements are included within the field of activities. The five great elements are a gross representation of the false ego, which in turn represents the primal stage of false ego, technically called the materialistic conception or tamas buddhi, intelligence in ignorance. This further represents the unmanifested stage of the three modes of material nature. The unmanifested modes of material nature are called pradhana. One who desires to know the 24 elements in detail, along with their interactions, should study the philosophy in more detail. In Bhagavad-gita, a summary only is given. The body is the representation of all these factors, and there are changes of the body which are 6 in number. The body is born, it grows, it stays, it produces byproducts, then it begins to decay, and at the last stage, it vanishes. Therefore, the field is a non-permanent material thing. However, the kshetragya, the knower of the field, its proprietor is different. Hare Krishna.
Yes. So, this is the approach of Sankhya to understand the difference between the field and the knower of the field. Very analytical. Like this is the field and the knower is beyond the field. So 24 elements, they constitute the field. Pancha Mahabhuta, Jnanendriya, Karmendriya, Indriya Vishaya, and Sukshma Tattva. You know this, right? Earth, water, fire, air, ether, nose, tongue, eyes, skin, ears, voice, legs, hands, genitals, smell, taste, form, touch, sound, mind, intelligence, false ego, and pradhan. Physics, biology, covered, right? To some extent. Psychology, not covered. So even our material science is incomplete, what we study in school. At least they should teach matter properly, if they cannot teach about soul. Even matter they don't teach completely and sufficiently. Let's say we say material science. Our school teaches us material science. So this is material science. 24 elements. But before opening Bhagavad Gita as it is, we did not even know material science. Right? Completely. So this is material science, 24 elements of study. And how are they generated? It's explained. Avyakta, which means pradhan, containing 3 modes, leads to mahatattva, which is buddhi, leads to ahankara. That ahankar, when mixes with the mode of goodness, produces mind. That ahankar, when mixes with the mode of passion, produces karma indriya and jnana indriya. And that ahankar, when mixes with mode of ignorance, produces the subtle and gross elements. Everything is made up of 3 modes. इसी को बोलते हैं माया जगत, illusory creation. And then again it's explained in Srimad Bhagavatam that from sound comes ether, from ether touch, from touch air, from air form, from form fire, taste, water, smell, earth. No scientist can understand, right? How does this happen? How from sound ether comes? How from ether touch comes? How from touch air comes? How from water smell comes and from how smell earth comes? From fire taste comes. Last slide, what is Sukshma Tattva? Sukshma means subtle. Tattva, you can say elements. Sukshma Tattva means subtle elements. Okay. Fine. Next verse. Okay, before we go to this is new topic. Let's just cover the few more slides which are remaining. Is, again, a question for you. Is desire a quality of the mind or the soul?
Mind.
Mind.
Both.
Mind. The quality of
Mind.
the soul, which is
Soul.
mind. So it's both.
Is desire a quality of the mind or soul?
Both.
Soul. Mind.
Hmm.
Quality of the soul, which is for which mind is the instrument through which it is manifested.
Yeah. So originally all the qualities are in the soul, but they get manifested through the instrument of the mind, right? Field and its limitations. So, because one is conditioned by the body or the field, one is limited in one's activities, both physical and mental. What is meant by knowledge? Knowledge is that which will help you go beyond the field. That's knowledge. That is called knowledge. So here again, there is an illustration. There's a plot of land, there's a house, and there's a backyard in the house. In that backyard, there's a dog and there's a kid and there is a snail. Okay. So the parents of the kid have left the kid in the house, locked the door, and told the kid, you can spend your time in the backyard. So the kid is playing in the backyard. That kid's activities are limited by the fence. The kid cannot go beyond the fence of the house, right? Similarly, the activities of the dog are limited by the fence. And the activities of the snail are also limited by the fence. Isn't it? However, within that limitation or boundary, the kid has more freedom to act than the dog. And the dog has more freedom to act than the snail. Isn't it? So here, this illustration is given just to explain to us how the snail becomes limited, the dog becomes limited, and the kid becomes limited. Similarly, the jiva also becomes limited in his thinking, feeling, willing, and sets of activities by the body that the jiva has, by the mind that the jiva has. Now, does the snail, though being within the fence or around the fence, around the fence, has the same feel as the boy?
No.
No. Why? Because the snail cannot read a book, the snail cannot jump around, the snail cannot ride the bicycle. Similarly, the boy also can't. So the boy has a relatively larger field than the dog and the snail. However, there's a man outside the house and there's a bird outside the house. So that man has a relatively greater field than the boy inside the house. No, so the boy cannot think of the world outside the house. Similarly, we are so limited by body and mind. We cannot think of things outside the body and mind. Now, how to go beyond that? The answer is knowledge. Jnanam, through knowledge. You go beyond the field. What is that is creating a limitation in the field? My own karma. Hmm. Lesson. Human life is a blessing. We understand that, definitely. And the life of a devotee is the greatest blessing. Because in that life, you get the chance to come out of those limitations of the body and the mind and the field that we created because of our own karma. So, jnanam, knowledge. How to acquire that knowledge? It's given in the next verses. Geyam, sorry, I came for Amanitvam adambitvam ahimsa shantirarjavam acharyopasanam Saucham स्थैर्यम् आत्मविनिग्रहः इन्द्रियार्थेषु वैराग्यम् अनहङ्कार एव च जन्म मृत्युजरा व्याधि दुःखदोषानुदर्शनम् असक्तिरनभिष्वङ्गः पुत्रदारगृहादिषु नित्यं च समचितत्वम् इष्टानिष्टोपपत्तिषु मयि चानन्ययोगेन भक्तिरव्यभिचारिणी विविक्तदेशसेवित्वम् आरतिर्जनसंसदि अध्यात्मज्ञाननित्यत्वं तत्त्वं ज्ञानार्थदर्शनम् एतज्ज्ञानमिति प्रोक्तम् अज्ञानं यत् अतोऽन्यथा. So this is what? Knowledge. Knowledge means to know three things and to have these qualities. The process of knowledge. It's jnana. Having these qualities help us transcend the limited field that we have acquired because of our past karma. Otherwise, we'll be stuck, within the fence of our limited thinking and feeling and willing. Not only our thinking is limited, our feeling is also limited. We agree or not? Yes, our feeling is limited. Therefore, when we chant the holy name, we don't feel the name. So our feeling is limited, right? And our willingness is also limited. So, because that's our karma. And by this knowledge or the process of knowledge, we can go beyond these limitations. Yeah, we're not capable of spiritual emotions. Limited, why? Because the truth is your spirit soul, but your realization is not there. Though that experience is still there, in the sense availability is there. The holy name is there. The spirit soul is there. The spirit soul can taste that sweetness of the holy name. But that experience is not there, or that realization is not there. Because the capacity to feel is not there. So we're limited by our mind, senses, body. Translation. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization, and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All this I declare to be knowledge. And besides this, whatever there may be is ignorance. So Prabhupada writes a long purport giving each quality a description or explanation. This is process of knowledge, right? 20 factors that help us in attaining knowledge. So this process is for realizing the Supreme Lord. And we should know that the realization may take place either directly from one of the processes or indirectly after practicing a succession of the methods mentioned. You should know one thing. It is also explained by the Acharyas. If you develop only one of these 20 qualities to perfection, it will lead to self-realization. Only one of these qualities to perfection, it will lead to self-realization. Any one of these qualities. Because they're interdependent. And then it's explained of these 20 qualities, 3 are sure to give you complete success quickly. As I mentioned previously, humility, serving a bona fide guru, and what is that? Steady bhakti, constant and unalloyed devotion without deviating. These are the 3 qualities. Read the proper. Paramgatical.
Purport. The process of knowledge is sometimes misunderstood by less intelligent men as being the interaction of the field of activity. But actually, this is the real process of knowledge. If one accepts this process, then the possibility of approaching the absolute truth exists. This is not the interaction of the 24 elements as described before. This is actually the means to get out of the entanglement of those elements. The embodied soul is entrapped by the body, which is a casing made of 24 elements, and the process of knowledge as described here is the means to get out of it. Of all the descriptions of process of knowledge, the most important point is described in the first line of the 11th verse. Mai chanenya yogena bhaktir avyabhicharini. The process of knowledge terminates in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord. So, if one does not approach or is not able to approach the transcendental service of the Lord, then the other 19 items are of no particular value. But if one takes to devotional service in full Krishna consciousness, the other 19 items automatically develop within him. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 5:18-12, Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana sarvair punestatra samasate suraha. All the good qualities of knowledge develop in one who has attained the stage of devotional service. The principle of accepting a spiritual master, as mentioned in the 8th verse, is essential. Even for one who takes to devotional service, it is most important. Transcendental life begins when one accepts a bona fide spiritual master. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, clearly states here that this process of knowledge is the actual path. Anything speculated beyond this is nonsense. As for the knowledge outlined here, the items may be analyzed as follows. Humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. The material conception of life makes us very eager to receive honor from others. But from the point of view of a man in perfect knowledge, who knows that he is not this body, anything, honor or dishonor pertaining to this deception. People are very anxious to be famous for their religion, and consequently, some the principles of religion, one enters into some not actually principles and then wants to advertise himself as a religious mentor. As for advancement in spiritual science, one should have how far he is progressing. He can judge these items. Non-violence is generally taken to mean not killing or destroying the body. But actually, non-violence means not to put others into distress. People in general are trapped by ignorance in the material concept of life and they perpetually suffer material pains. So, unless one elevates people to spiritual knowledge, one is practicing violence. One should try this best to distribute real knowledge to the people. They may become enlightened and leave this material entanglement. That is non-violence. Tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. If one is engaged in the advancement of spiritual knowledge, there will be so many insults and much dishonor expected because there is so constituted. Even a boy like Prahlad, only 5 years old, was engaged in the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, was endangered when his father became antagonistic to his devotion. The father tried to kill him in so many ways, but Prahlad tolerated him. So there may be many impediments to making advancement in spiritual knowledge. But we should be tolerant and continue our progress with determination. Simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth, even to an enemy. As for acceptance of the spiritual master, that is essential. Because without the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, one cannot progress in the spiritual science. One should approach the spiritual master with all humility and offer him all services so that he will be pleased to bestow his blessings upon the disciple. Because a bona fide spiritual master is a representative of Krishna. If he bestows any blessings upon his disciple, that will make the disciple immediately advance without the disciples following the regulative principles. Or the regulative principles will be easier for one who has served the spiritual master without reservation. Cleanliness is essential for making advancement in spiritual life. There are two kinds of cleanliness, external and internal. External cleanliness means taking a bath, but for internal cleanliness, one has to think of Krishna always and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This process cleans the accumulated dust of past karma from the mind. Steadiness means that one should be very determined to make progress in spiritual life. Without such determination, one cannot make tangible progress. And self-control means that one should not accept anything which is detrimental to the path of spiritual progress. One should become accustomed to this and reject anything which is against the path of spiritual progress. One should become accustomed to this. This is real renunciation. The senses are so strong that they are always anxious to have sense gratification. One should not cater to these demands, which are not necessary. The senses should only be gratified to keep the body fit, so that one can discharge his duty in advancing in spiritual life. The most important and uncontrollable sense is the tongue. If one can control the tongue, then there is every possibility of controlling the other senses. The function of the tongue is to taste and to vibrate. Therefore, by systematic regulation, the tongue should always be engaged in tasting the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna and chanting Hare Krishna. As far as the eyes are concerned, they should not be allowed to see anything but the beautiful form of Krishna. That will control the eyes. Similarly, the ears should be engaged in hearing about Krishna and the nose in smelling the flowers offered to Krishna. This is the process of devotional service. And it is understood here that Bhagavad-gita is simply expounding the science of devotional service. Devotional service is the main and sole objective. Unintelligent commentators on the Bhagavad-gita try to divert the mind of the reader to other subjects. But there is no other subject in Bhagavad-gita than devotional service.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare
Neha
Krishna.
Mataji, can you continue, please?
False ego means accepting this body as oneself. When one understands that he is not his body and his spirit soul, he comes to his real ego. Ego is there. False ego is condemned, but not real ego. In the Vedic literature, Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad 1.4.10, it is said, Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman, I am spirit. This I am, the sense of self, also exists in the liberated stage of self-realization. This sense of I am is ego. But when the sense of I am is applied to this false body, it is false ego. When the sense of self is applied to reality, that is real ego. There are some philosophers who say we should give up our ego, but we cannot give up our ego because ego means identity. We ought, of course, to give up the false identification with the body. One should try to understand the distress of accepting birth, death, old age, and disease. There are descriptions in various Vedic literatures of birth. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the world of the unborn, the child's stay in the womb of the mother, its suffering, etc., are all very graphically described. It should be thoroughly understood that birth is distressful. Because we forget how much distress we have suffered within the womb of the mother, we do not make any solution to the repetition of birth and death. Similarly, at the time of death, there are all kinds of sufferings, and they are also mentioned in the authoritative scriptures. These should be discussed. And as far as disease and old age are concerned, everyone gets practical experience. No one wants to be diseased and no one wants to become old, but there is no avoiding these. Unless we have a pessimistic view of this material life, considering the distresses of birth, death, old age, and disease, there is no impetus for our making advancement in spiritual life. As for detachment from children, wife, and home, it is not meant that one should have no feeling for these. They are natural objects of affection. But when they are not favorable to spiritual progress, then one should not be attached to them. The best process for making the home pleasant is Krishna consciousness. If one is in full Krishna consciousness, he can make his home very happy. Because this process of Krishna consciousness is very easy. One need only chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Accept the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna. Have some discussion on books like Bhagavad-gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And Prabhuji, could you please and engage oneself in deity worship. These four things will make one happy. One should train the members of his family in this way. The family members can sit down morning and evening and chant together Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. If one can mold his family life in this way to develop Krishna consciousness, following these four principles, then there is no need to change from family life to renounced life. But if it is not congenial, not favorable for spiritual advancement, then family life should be abandoned. One must sacrifice everything to realize or serve Krishna, just as Arjuna did. Arjuna did not want to kill his family members, but when he understood that these family members were impediments to his Krishna realization, he accepted the instruction of Krishna and fought and killed them. In all cases, one should be detached from the happiness and distress of family life, because in this world, one can never be fully happy or fully miserable. Happiness and distress are concomitant factors of material life. One should learn to tolerate, as advised in Bhagavad-gita. One can never restrict the coming and going of happiness and distress. So one should be detached from the materialistic way of life and be automatically equipoised in both cases. Generally, when we get something desirable, we are very happy. And when we get something undesirable, we are distressed. But if we are actually in the spiritual position, these things will not agitate us. To reach that stage, we have to practice unbreakable devotional service. Devotional service to Krishna without deviation means engaging oneself in the 9 processes of devotional service: chanting, hearing, worshipping, offering respect, etc., as described in the last verse of the 9th chapter. That process should be followed. Naturally, when one is adapted to the spiritual way of life, he will not want to mix with materialistic men. That would go against his grain. One may test himself by seeing how far he is inclined to live in a solitary place without unwanted association. Naturally, a devotee has no taste for unnecessary sporting or cinema going or enjoying some social function because he understands that these are simply a waste of time. There are many research scholars and philosophers who study sex life or some other subject. But according to Bhagavad Gita, such research work and philosophical speculation have no value. That is more or less nonsensical. According to Bhagavad Gita, one should make research by philosophical discretion into the nature of the soul. One should make research to understand the self. That is recommended here. As far as self-realization is concerned, it is clearly stated here that Bhakti Yoga is specially practical. As soon as there is a question of devotion, one must consider the relationship between the super soul and the individual soul. The individual soul and the super soul cannot be one, at least not in the Bhakti conception, the devotional conception of life. This service of the individual soul to the Supreme Soul is eternal, nityam, as it is clearly stated. So, bhakti or devotional service is eternal. One should be established in that philosophical conviction. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 1 to 11, this is explained. Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yat jnanam advayam. Those who are actually knowers of the absolute truth know that the self is realized in 3 different phases as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan. Bhagwan is the last word in the realization of the absolute truth. Therefore, one should reach up to that platform of understanding. That platform of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus engage in the devotional service of the Lord. That is the perfection of knowledge. Beginning from practicing humility up to the point of realization of the supreme truth, the absolute personality of Godhead, this process is just like a staircase beginning from the ground floor and going up to the top floor. Now, on this staircase, there are so many people who have reached the first floor, the second or the third floor, etc. But unless one reaches the top floor, which is the understanding of Krishna, he is at a lower stage of knowledge. If anyone wants to compete with God and at the same time make advancement in spiritual knowledge, he will be frustrated. It is clearly stated that without humility, understanding is not truly possible. To think oneself God is most puffed up. Although the living entity is always being kicked by the stringent laws of material nature, he still thinks, I am God, because of ignorance. The beginning of knowledge, therefore, is amanitva, humility. One should be humble and know that he is subordinate to the Supreme Lord. Due to rebellion against the Supreme Lord, one becomes subordinate to material nature. One must know and be convinced of this truth. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So we'll stop here. Any questions or comments?
Prabhuji,
Any
maybe
answers to do
one
in the next?
question I have.
Yeah.
In the purport, it is given when sense of self is applied to reality, it is real ego. How do we understand this? Sense of self
Sense of
is
self
applied
is
to reality.
applied to reality. What is that reality? In Krishna's servant. So that is reality. Now the sense of self. Sense of self means identity. Okay.
Okay.
Hmm.
Prabhuji, I have also heard some of our Guru Maharaj is saying that real ego is humility.
Real ego is humility. What will be the meaning of that statement? If you have heard someone say like that, what can be the meaning of that statement? Please think little bit. No? What is real ego? Real ego means your real identity. What is that real identity? I am Krishna's servant. Right? So if you accept that identity, then you have all the qualities which the soul has. That includes humility, that includes compassion, that includes gratitude, that includes everything. So that's why one thing is very important. I have observed this. I'm teaching Bhakti-sastri here in VIH in Vrindavan. So I observed that many of the devotees in our movement, we get confused in what we hear in the lectures or what we read in the books because our basics are not very clear. You keep your basics clear, then you will understand that when a person is making a statement, what is the actual message that person wants to convey or pass? No. Fine. So our basics should be very clear. We should know the basic siddhanta, the basic philosophy very nice. Because someone is speaking something, that person may have a certain message to convey, which he is conveying or she is conveying in a particular way, manner. Because language is something like that. It can be decorated, you can paraphrase things, you can speak certain things in a certain way. So you should be able to understand what that person is trying to say. So when you heard someone say, real ego is humility. Is that the definition of ego? Cannot be. What it can mean is, if someone is really situated on the platform of real ego, then that person will demonstrate humility. So our basics should be very clear. We should read our Prabhupada books very nicely and thoroughly understand the philosophy, the basics. Then whatever lecture you hear, whatever statement someone makes, you'll understand in the proper manner, the correct manner. Question. Is Srila Prabhupada saying that if somebody is not preaching Krishna consciousness, is committing violence? Yes. In the tolerance paragraph, it seems that if we actually practice Krishna consciousness, we would have to tolerate more. Will this not be a problem to take up Krishna consciousness? No. You'll have to tolerate more. That doesn't mean that it becomes a botheration. It only means that your capacity to tolerate increases. The example given for simplicity seems like foolishness, since disclosing truth to an enemy might bring more problems. Please enlighten. It is true. You see, what Prabhupada is explaining here is an example, is an extreme example. One has to be realistic. So a person who is simple in nature may have that kind of heart that he or she may tell the truth to even an enemy. But that doesn't mean that a devotee will also do something like that always, because along with being simple, a devotee will also be very practical and realistic. Right? So that's an extreme example. But that doesn't mean that devotees are dumb devotees are dumb or naive. Devotees are very clever also. So that's an example, just an example. What actually simplicity means? What can be the, how is the heart of a person who is simple? Are there any example of blessing of spiritual master where the disciple has not followed regulated principles, just by the blessing has reached perfection? I don't think so. I can recall any example from the scripture that any specifically mentioned that one did not do any follow any regulated principles, but achieve perfection. What is being mentioned here is of kripa siddha, not sadhana siddha. So it's a concept of kripa siddha, that by mercy you attain perfection. Now, examples of kripa siddha. No. So, but I think this applies in all the devotees' case in Kali Yuga. Because in Kali Yuga, no one can be perfect in executing sadhana. So, by the blessing factor or kripa factor, one attains perfection. But in Shastra, I don't know which example is there for without any regulated principles. Okay, any other question?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam. Prabhuji, here it is written that our transcendental life only when we accept a bona fide spiritual master in our life. But prior to that, if we have not accepted, we have not met, but now that we have met, so does it mean that our transcendental life begins now, and whatever we did was a waste or something like that?
So when you say your transcendental life begins when you have accepted a bona fide spiritual master.
Yes, Prabhuji. What does
So
it mean?
the meaning that you are taking is Diksha Guru.
Yes,
You are wrong. Bona fide spiritual master can mean both Diksha Guru and Siksha Guru.
Okay, good.
Right.
Okay. And
so the day you have accepted for you have started following Srila Prabhupada, you are in contact with the bona fide spiritual master, right or wrong?
yeah, we are. Yes, right. And it says to reach, we should always practice unbreakable devotional service. Means the Nauda Bhakti, we have to follow each and every one of them very strictly, or hearing, chanting, and worshipping. That is the top three, is the most important one, Prabhuji. During sadhana, we do everything, reading,
Top
hearing.
three.
Top three. Okay. Thank you,
Shravanam,
Prabhuji.
Kirtanam.
And Vishnu Smaran.
Smaranam also doesn't happen so easily. So Shravanam and Kirtanam.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Krishna Prabhu,
Hmm.
you were saying that we can achieve Ananda, but is it due to our mind or karma that we can't experience it fully?
Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, regarding the true ahimsa, non-violence, does that mean only if we preach, otherwise our behavior, we still violent?
Preaching means both, na? It's your behavior, it's your speech, everything. It's not that you just have to go out and give lectures. That is preaching. What is meant by preaching? Prabhupada says, if you don't preach, you are committing violence. Here he's talking about the spirit. Do you have the spirit of a preacher? That spirit should be there. It doesn't mean that you have to be wholly giving lectures or distributing books, then you are a preacher. Preacher means the spirit should be there. What is that spirit? What is that spirit of preaching? What is the spirit
We
of
are we're the servant of Krishna.
That's not the spirit of preaching.
Um,
Yara dekhe tara kaha Krishna upadesh. That is the spirit of preaching. Now, whether you are doing Krishna upadesh to yourself, you are doing the Krishna upadesh to your children, you are doing Krishna upadesh to your neighbor, you are doing Krishna upadesh to someone on the street, that is preaching. Yara dekhe tara kaha Krishna upadesh. That's preaching. So that spirit has to be there. Preaching doesn't just boil down to, oh, you are conducting some Bhakti Viksha programs and you are distributing some books and you're giving some lectures. That spirit has to be there. Right? If that spirit is there, you may contribute in different ways because not everyone has the same way of contributing. But that spirit has to be there. You know. So then you can contribute in small ways also. Yeah, you can contribute in big ways also. You can contribute being in the forefront. You can contribute being in the background. You're preaching. That spirit has to be there. That's all.
Okay.
Yes, someone was saying. Paramguru was saying something.
Yeah. So, so you said preaching in the background. So basically, helping the preachers. If we cannot preach, helping the preachers in different
You can
ways.
help the
Maybe.
preachers. Yes, you can help the preachers. You can do anything. That fire should be there. That spirit should be there. That I should contribute to the mission of Srila Prabhupada in some way. That's all. That's preaching. It can be anywhere. Right? Some contribution to the mission. That's preaching.
So, Prabhu, does that mean all seva is preaching?
Indirectly, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Indirectly, yes. Everything we are doing is preaching. For example, if I keep the temple clean, that is also preaching. Because I visited some iskcon temples which are not clean. And even I don't feel like going there. So what to speak of a non-devotee? So if the temple is clean, that is also preaching. If we are decorating the deity very nicely, that is also preaching because many people may just come to temple to see the deity. That it is so nicely decorated. Isn't it? Right or wrong? So
Yes.
spirit, if that spirit is there, you will exhibit that spirit in everything you do. Whether it is cooking bhoga for Krishna, whether it is decorating the deity of Krishna, whether it's cleaning the temple, because you want to do it in a way that will make Krishna glorious. Preaching is what? You're glorifying Krishna. That's preaching. So you can glorify Krishna by talking about Krishna. You can glorify Krishna by decorating Krishna. You can glorify Krishna by making very nice bhoga for Krishna and then sharing it with others. That's spreading Krishna's glories. That is preaching. Now, how do you spread someone's glories? By making that person glorious in front of others. And how do you make that person glorious? You talk more, you talk gloriously about that person, right? You present that person as glorious. That's how you do it. So there can be different ways to do it. Right or wrong. So that's preaching.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. But generally, when it says preaching, we all used to understand that preaching means you should give formal lectures about Bhagavad-gita or whatever, in the temple or to the devotees. But what you've told us is really very nice. Like whatever activities we do in our life or outside is to glorify Krishna in everything that we do.
Yes, that is preaching. You glorify Krishna. That's preaching. Not just giving lecture. Because if everyone starts giving lectures, the number of speakers will be more than the number of listeners. And then there'll be a great imbalance in the society.
Too many chiefs, Prabhu.
Yes. So that's why that is not practical, isn't it? Not practical. This is something very important for us to understand, that some devotees, they think success in Krishna consciousness means you have to be in the forefront. You should become a good speaker, you should become a good singer, you should become a temple president, you should become a Bhakti Viksha leader, then you should become a big book distributor, you should construct 10 temples, you should do this, you should do that. Then you become a good devotee of Krishna. So, but that is very wrong, because if that is so, then the scope of becoming a good devotee is very limited. Because only few people can be good speakers, good singers. Only few people can make 10 temples. Only few people can distribute millions of books. Right? And that means we are limiting the scope of devotional service, which is a very stupid understanding. Right? So devotional service is not proportional to these activities only. And that's why it's an opportunity for everyone. Any way you can be a preacher, a devotee, a pure devotee of Krishna in any way. But this is like in the society outside, people have a hype, like in India, there's a hype. Become an engineer, become a doctor, become a CA. Like there's a hype, a fashion in the outside world. Similarly, there is a fashion in the iskcon world also. What fashion? Become a good singer, become a good speaker, become a big book distributor, become a fund collector, become this, become that. So that's a hype. Why it's a hype? Because it's not a symptom of a good devotee or a pure devotee doing such activities, isn't it? It's a hype. So that's why we should not get into that misunderstanding. Do whatever you can with your best capacity from your heart for Krishna's pleasure. It can be the tiniest thing or it can be the biggest thing. Okay, Madhuri? Because I'm telling you from experience now. Giving a good class after some time becomes a habit. without devotion. Honestly telling, you can give a good class as a habit without devotion. Yes. Just like you can make a good pasta every time without devotion. Because making a good pasta is a skill. So giving a good class is a skill. Doing a nice kirtan is a skill. And a skill develops, by practice, by habit. So anything, these are all superficial, extremely superficial. That's why we should not get into that understanding. Whatever you do with complete, heart that I am offering this to Krishna. It is for Krishna's pleasure, even if it is a small thing, tiny thing.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. But here in this,
See, like for example, Lalita Brishta Gopi Mataji, she's from China. Now, what is the scope of preaching in China? Very limited, correct? Isn't it? So if preaching makes you a pure devotee of Krishna, how much preaching can she do? She can't. Very limited scope. But then can we say now big devotees in China cannot become pure devotees of Krishna because they cannot preach like you can preach in India? You can't, isn't it?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Because I read Srimad Bhagavatam this morning, also chapter Canto 1 and chapter 8, and also it mentioned about the real non-violence, but it refers to the Pariksit Maharaj as a first how to say the first how to say Parahamsa stage. So that means here Prabhupada in this paragraph maybe different level of non-violence. This is referring to the highest level of non-violence. Then he mentioned that only when he can improve, he can bring general people to spiritual, knowledge stage. Otherwise, his behavior is violence. So in this,
yes, anything can be understood from different levels, right? Anything can be understood from different levels, any quality. So Prabhupada is explaining here non-violence from a different angle, from a different level. That if you're not reaching Krishna consciousness, you are doing non-violence. Sorry, you're doing violence. So it's a very transcendental level of defining non-violence. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So we stop here. See you next week.
Thank you very much for today's last lesson. What is glorification and what is preaching? I always misunderstood, and there's always a lot of pressure from the temple to collect funds, distribute books. But sometimes we have our own limitations at doing these activities. I really thank you from the bottom of my heart to make us understand this. Thank
Don't
you.
take such pressures.
Thank you.
Already Maya is giving so much pressure. More pressure.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu, so much. Thank you.
And if they're pressurizing more, then you give them my Bhakti-sastri class.
Yes, Prabhuji, I do distribute in my group. I do send the links and all. Yeah. I also say it's a very good, you're a very good, take very good lessons. Maybe some people have joined also.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.